Hello and welcome to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. Now, I've got to say, by looking into the chat, thanks for everybody who's coming to the show tonight. We know there's a lot on holiday and probably people are doing other things, but great that if you've made it onto tonight's show. So I'll just do a few name calls in a nice way. And we've got Lisa Odd in the chat tonight. Welcome, Lisa. And as you know, Sky Flower is doing our moderating tonight, so please be nice and keep all comments friendly. Also, we've got Stephen Giles in, and we have Barbara Davis, Ian Slater, Anthony Hudson, Alison Buttle, Jason Taylor, MKMD Exploration. Welcome to the show. And let's have a look. I'll scroll down. We have, let's see if I can find some more. Who's coming tonight? If I've missed anybody out, I apologise. Stargazer Eternal 1, welcome to the show. And Jane Louise Bowery, welcome, Jane. And Johnny Appleseed, Alien Woods, Diana Farrell, Rolf Winter. I've got to welcome everybody to tonight's live stream. So as you know by the banner, I've got a great guest on tonight, and it just leaves me to introduce Paul to introduce our guest.
Thank you very much, Les. And another night's come round really quick, or another week, should we say. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be talking to Rick Doty. If you don't know Rick, he's a retired special agent who worked for OSI, the United States Air Force of Special Investigations, I think from 1978 to 1980. I'm sure he will correct me if I'm wrong. He also worked for Det 3 Test Center, now known as Area 51. Rick, welcome to Truth Proof.
Thank you. Good to be on the show.
Yeah, it's great. It's a pleasure, and I enjoyed your company at the Awakening Conference a few months ago, and what you'd got to tell us. Quite a controversial figure, to be honest, Rick, but nevertheless, it's good to listen to what you've got to say. Let it start rolling.
Yeah.
What can you tell us? Begin where you want to begin. Tell people about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was in the regular Air Force for 4 years, got out, went to college, and then went to work for the U.S. Intelligence Agency. As Paul said, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I was assigned as a counterintelligence officer there at Kirtland Air Force Base, also up in Nevada, Area 51, worked there. Investigated incidents involving UFOs or ET contacts for my a little over 10 years, from 1978 to 1988. After that, I worked for the Institute for Advanced Studies, Hal Puthoff's organization in Austin, Texas. And after that, I've been a freelance. I've been assisting in on-set movie sets, writing scripts for movies, technical advisors on different movies. And I've been speaking virtually all over the world. I met Paul in Blackpool back in June. We had a fantastic conversation. I really, really enjoyed his research into this subject, his books that are out there. He was kind enough to give me one of the books, and I purchased some others. Fascinating information in those books. I've been invited back to Manchester this October 16th for the Mini Awakening, which I will give a presentation on the secret space program. It's going to be a 2.5-hour presentation on some really, really interesting and formally classified aspects of the secret space program. And it's going to be a fascinating event. Whitley Strieber is going to be there. I hope to see Paul there and others. But that's what we have planned in UK. I love the UK. I've been over there several times. Had a lot of good friends there, and I have a a project that I'm working on right now. It's called the Doty Chronicles, and that's going to be coming out in early spring. It's going to be featured on YouTube and also on Netflix. It's going to be a mini series on my experiences and investigations within the time I was in the U.S. Intelligence Service. So look for that, and also I have a book coming out. Finally, I wrote a manuscript years ago. I had problems getting it getting it published because it contains a lot of really sensitive information. They censored a lot of the information, but I was able to rewrite it in a different manner. And that should be coming out hopefully this fall or January, February.
Brilliant. And sounds like you're non-stop pretty much, Rick, and that's quite good. It's quite a record. Do you want to tell us about some of this sensitive information, or is there other things that you can't tell us? Or shall we start with, I understand that you were given a briefing by a colonel and how you got into the role of what?
Right. Well, back in when I first of all, let me explain something. When I was trained in intelligence, I went through a number of different schools. The intelligence officers course, which was a very demanding 22-week course. I went to a Defense Intelligence Agency course. I went to the Air Force Office of Special Investigation School. So I was very well trained in counterintelligence and counterespionage. But at no time during any of this training was the subject of UFOs or alien contacts ever mentioned. Of the 9 or 12 months that I spent in schools learning how to spy and how to conduct counterintelligence, counterespionage operations, not one word about UFOs.
Rick, do you think it's possible back then they were looking for people like you, though? Do you think you were being observed?
Well, let me tell you that my father is a retired Air Force colonel. He passed away, but he worked in intelligence for most of his career. He was a pilot. He was shot down in Korea, and after fortunately he was rescued and brought back to friendly lines. And then after that, he never flew again. He went into intelligence. So he spent 30 some years in intelligence. My uncle, his brother, Edward Doty, spent about 28 years in intelligence. And my uncle Edward worked in the subject of UFOs. He worked on Project Blue Book. He's famous for the Lonnie Zamora incident in Socorro, New Mexico. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know about that case. He actually investigated that case. So I had some background, at least family background. But during my time growing up, I was never interested in the subject of UFOs. My brother, on the other hand, John, who's older than me, he was the UFO nut in the family, we called him. But I never had any interest in it. So jump ahead to after my training, I was assigned to Kirtland Air Force Base as a counterintelligence officer. And I had the occasion to investigate an incident that involved the UFO. It was called the Coyote Canyon incident. And in order to fully understand what I was getting into, I had to go get a briefing. And I went to a secure facility on base on Kirtland, and I received this briefing by this Air Force colonel. The briefing was called Project, it had a number, and then it was Project Aquarius. And I was briefed into the program of the United States government's investigation of UFOs from 1947 on. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, we had contact with UFOs before that. Well, I only was briefed on from 1947, the Roswell incident, on to the present day, which would have been 1979. And I was shocked to see and hear what we've done during that time period. I didn't know much about the Roswell incident, although I think I heard about it. Uh, Somebody mentioned something about it in my childhood, but and my father, we were actually stationed there at Roswell Army Airfield, although it was called Walker Air Force Base then in the 50s. And so, and there was rumors about it, but I didn't realize it was real until I received this briefing, which consisted of a film showing the recovery of the Corona crash, or one of the site where the actual full spacecraft crashed, which is north of Roswell, and the live alien that they found at the crash site. And then what we've done since then. So I was somewhat shocked. In fact, after this briefing, which lasted a couple hours, I drove from the west side of Kirtland back to my office, which was on the east side of Kirtland. And I actually had to pull over into a parking lot and sit there and contemplate what I just heard and what I just saw.
Well, I was going to say, were you shown images as well?
Oh, absolutely. There were images of the craft, the crashed craft, the alien bodies that were found at the site. One picture of the live alien, the recovery process, the recovery operation of the Army Air Force, and the some of the interior of this craft. Now, there's also a picture of President Truman, the U.S. president during that time period in 47, at the site. And so all these things were quite overwhelming to me because I just didn't have the knowledge before that. I never was interested in the subject. So when I pulled over, I thought about it. And I thought, well, is this number one, some kind of disinformation that they're trying to trick us intelligence officers into? And I thought about it. The more I thought about it, I thought there's no way they could have faked all this stuff that I just seen. And then secondly, why would they tell me this if it wasn't true? And so then I went on to investigate for the next 11 years, UFO and alien incidents. So I realized at the time that what we United States government had captured an alien craft. And I, of course, learned that we had we investigated other crash sites, recovered alien crafts at other crash sites in the United States.
Am I right in thinking, Rick? Am I right in thinking that there were two space vehicles, should we call them that crashed in 47?
Right. Yeah, actually, what happened in 1947? This is what was pieced together. There was two alien crafts flying around New Mexico, exploring, I guess, the Southwest United States. Now, Roswell isn't very far from the Trinity site where the first nuclear bomb exploded in August 1945. So maybe because we detonated a nuclear weapon, that was some sort of an advertisement to space. I don't know. But anyways, there was two alien crafts flying in New Mexico during July of 1947. Now, New Mexico is famous for lightning storms, hellacious lightning storms. And during this time that they were flying, there was a lightning storm. And apparently we think that the two crafts, because of the lightning, and they didn't have lightning on their planet, they didn't know what it was, or didn't have any kind of countermeasures for it. The two crafts crashed over central New Mexico. One craft landed or crashed near Corona, New Mexico, which is north of Roswell. Now, at that crash site, this craft, first of all, had an antenna on the back of it, an extension. That antenna craft landed in a different location than the craft itself. That antenna landed in a debris field on the Matt Brazel Ranch, and that's what was found by some people. Right. Now, the actual craft landed near Corona, near another ranch. There was an archaeological team exploring that area at the time, and they're the ones that found that craft. Now, the second craft the actual one that collided, landed hundreds of miles away in western New Mexico near Pelona Peak, south of Daddle, New Mexico. But that craft wasn't found until 1949. It's in a very remote location in New Mexico. New Mexico at that time was very remote. It was found by a rancher moving his cattle to a higher pasture. He found it. It took him some time to get down to a telephone. He called the local sheriff. The Catron County sheriff came out, but he didn't come out for a week later. He saw what it was, figured it was probably something to do with the Army Air Force or the Air Force at the time. He went back, called the Air Force, and they came down and recovered it. And there were dead bodies inside the craft, but they were highly decayed because they'd been up there for so many years. So that's the actual Roswell, the truth about the Roswell incident.
And so when you were shown this, and you're sort of thinking, they can't make this up, this can't possibly be true. Do you still think that, based on some of the things that you've been involved in later years, as in convincing people that they've not seen a UFO? Or
no, I'm thoroughly 100% convinced that everything I saw in those films was factual. In fact, almost all of it's been verified by other means over the years, other intelligence officers, other things that I've seen, other things that I've read, other photos that I've seen and read, and little pictures that or actually videotapes that I've seen of ETs.
Tied in with what you've heard.
Yes. So I'm convinced that Roswell happened. It happened the way I'm telling you. It happened the way I was told. And then there was other people that came forth after this. I'm not the only one. There was many other people that have come. A lot of them, some of them are dead. There's a few still alive. People like Wendell Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. He was one of the chief on-site investigators for recovery operations of UFOs, and others. Colonel Castle, Colonel Log. I mean, there's so many other people that came forth that just didn't get the prominence that I have gotten, that have talked about the same subject. So
I don't expect you to give a number, but we're talking about quite a few more than at Roswell that have crashed then between 47 and now. If they're so advanced, why? I know you said a lightning storm and they might not have it where they're from, but I mean, what we're talking out in years of advancement, has it been estimated? Are we talking 10,000, 50,000? What has anybody speculated on that?
Well, first of all, the craft that was recovered at Roswell, which, according to what I knew, was the very first alien craft that we got into our custody. It was obviously more advanced than anything we ever had, and we're talking in the late 40s. So our scientists couldn't understand anything on that craft. Couldn't understand the propulsion system. Couldn't understand the power system. Couldn't understand anything. But fortunately, we had a live alien. We had Eva. They called him Eva, as why they did that, I don't know. I don't think anyone really fully explained it. But EBA stands for extraterrestrial biological entities. So someone within the government, intelligence, or maybe even the medical community back then named him EBA. EBA was alive, although he couldn't communicate with us because we didn't know his language. He didn't know our language. He could speak a language, but we couldn't understand it. It's a high-pitched tonal language. But fortunately, the 5 years that he was in captivity, he was able to learn our technology and our societal education more than we could understand him. And at some point, a very smart physician, surgeon, was able to manufacture something to put in his throat in order for him to pronounce our words. And he learned our language, English, and he was able to speak. Although the problem is he didn't know our science. We didn't know his science. We didn't know his math. Now you got to sit there and think about this for a minute. If you're talking to something entirely alien and he's trying to explain his technology to you, but you don't know anything about his technology, how do you understand it?
Yeah.
So that's the problem that faced US scientists back in those days. They were able to learn a lot from him, and they were able to learn a lot about his craft, but not everything. Now, another question you asked me is, how many other crafts? Well, there were many other crash sites happened after that. Kingman, Arizona, there was a crash in Kingman, Arizona. There was a crash in several in Nevada. And there was a famous one, which it had very, very, very little publicity, that happened in the southern part of France. And the French Air Force found it in 1956. Didn't know what it was. Didn't know anything about what we knew about UFOs. We had bases back in those days. We had military bases in France, part of NATO. And so Air Force officers went down there to view this craft that had crashed. And one of them had been briefed into a program similar to what I was briefed into. And he realized what it was, but he didn't tell the French.
Right.
So anyways, the French gave it to us. They gave the craft to us. We brought it back on a ship anyways. And now we found out that craft was a different technology. Now, not every craft that's crashed that we've recovered is the same alien technology.
Yeah.
I knew back in those days, I knew of 5 groups of aliens. I was briefed in 5 different groups. They all had different technologies. They all came from different solar systems, or different star groups, different planets. So they had different technologies. Their biological structures were different. So I know a lot of people out there will say, well, why didn't you learn this from these aliens? Or, well, they're all different. We have to learn different technologies. We have to educate ourselves. Now, Dr. Hal Puthoff, very smart person, said years ago, in order to understand alien technology, we have to go back to their first grade and learn their math, their calculus, their science, their physics, to understand their craft. And that's basically the truth.
And is it all extraterrestrial? Has anybody hinted that they're from somewhere else? Or is it all space?
Now, I don't know. I don't know that question. I can speculate, but I've never been briefed. I never saw anything in writing, any kind of classified information to answer that question. But I know there's people out there smarter than me, have been briefed into more of this than I have. And one of them is Dr. Puthoff. He just wrote a paper a couple of years ago about this. And there's a possibility that these extraterrestrials come from a vast distance. You know, maybe we know Eva came from 37.5 light years, or 37.9 light years away. And they were able to transverse that in 9 months. You know, that's beyond our comprehension. But there's others that probably came, we think, from hundreds of light years away, and maybe even thousands of light years away. And we think there's a possibility that they're able to live in a different dimension on Earth, and then open up into our dimension. Now, that's about all I know about it. And that's about all I could speculate, but I don't know anything else about that.
Well, obviously you've a lot more knowledge of this than me, Rick, and all I could do is speculate. But after a lifetime of interaction with something as a child, that we'll call it alien, but I don't know whether it's necessarily extraterrestrial. I would be of the opinion that whatever they are, they're not traveling from anywhere. They're already here. But the big question is where, you know, because they're not here. You know what I'm saying, don't you? But
yes.
And these things, I mean, they're able to pass through walls, pass through solid objects. How did they, or did they ever say how they contained this this alien that they'd got in captivity?
Well, there are a number of different ones in captivity at Area 51. They call it S2 Annex. And you can Google this area, and it's still there on the map. I don't know if there's any ETs still there or not, but back in the 80s, they had them. They had to build special containment facilities for each one of these ETs because they all were different. They all breathed different atmospheres. One of them even had to breathe a little bit of methane in their mixture of gases. They ate different. Their pressures on their bodies are different. So they had to build containment facilities. Now, there are some, I know you know the story, you heard a story about the Gate 3 incident where one escaped. He got out of the containment facility and he was able to won't roam around until he was captured again. Now there's another case that didn't get as much prominence as that one, the Gate 3 incident, but there was another one that did the same thing. Unfortunately, they shut the military police on Nellis Test and Training Range had to shoot and kill it. So it's a biological. They're all biological, and they can die. You can shoot them. They're not super natural, at least that I know of. I'm only talking about the 5 that I know of. Now, I know there's probably people going to say, oh, there's hundreds or thousands of them. Well, I don't know any about those hundreds of thousands. I only know about these 5, and I can tell you a lot about these 5, but I can't tell you about anybody else, any other ETs. Now, I imagine there probably have been others that have visited. And one of the reasons that we know that some of them are extraterrestrial is because we've been able, and this is something I'm going to talk about in the secret space program, we've been able to track extraterrestrial spaceships coming into our solar system and into our atmosphere and landing on Earth. Now, we know that at least that particular species of ETs are coming from someplace else, whether it's within our solar system or someplace else. So we know that some of them do that. Now, I understand what you're saying about maybe they could be living in an interdimensional world, some other dimension, or maybe even a parallel universe. I'm not a physics specialist. My degrees in political science and history and education. I teach math, but I wouldn't be in a position to understand how somebody could, how 2 universes could be so close together and maybe even overlap at times. I know there's other scientists out there that have written papers about that, but I only know what I was briefed, and I believe in that.
Yeah. Why? I'm asking you something, and once again, you're only going to be able to speculate, I would think, but why have they all had, or did they all have arms and legs? Were they different? We know that they look different to us, but the general image we come away with is arms, legs, and a head. Why? Any opinion on that?
No, there's a lot of there's papers written about that by medical professionals and biologists. I think in order to function in an atmosphere or even travel from one planet to another, they have to have the apparatuses to function. Yeah, and hands, legs. Although a lot of them different. A lot of these they might have arms and legs, but their internal organs are entirely different. Their brain structures are different. They function differently. their fluids in their bodies are different. Now, there is a story that was put out way back. Sometime around 10 to 12 years ago, I'll say, I don't know exactly when, about a contact that we had, not here, but at an island in the Indian Ocean called Kerguelen Island. It's the most remote island in the world. It's owned by the French. French has a a base, a satellite tracking. They have military down there, and they have scientists down there. Some years ago, a craft came there, and there was some kind of contact, but the creatures in the craft couldn't live outside the craft. And as I understand, the movie that came out 4 or 5 years ago called Arrival was based on that incident. And if you've ever seen that movie, these creatures are huge, and they only could live inside their spacecraft. They couldn't live outside. And that's supposedly what happened down there in that island. This was a French ufologist gave us a lecture some years ago at a UFO convention about this case, although he didn't have a whole lot because the French government, the French military classified it.
Okay.
So there is possibility that creatures are coming or entities are coming from other planets that are not like us. Don't have arms and legs. But I don't know about anything other than that one.
Have you got any knowledge of hostile intent from these visitors?
Well, the only hostile, there is one particular race that they came here and did some harm back in the 80s. And President Reagan was briefed into this. And that's why he was so afraid of the threat that could be posed from space. He made 3 different public references to that in speeches, one particular at the United Nations and 2 others. And he also decided that we needed to protect Earth. He thought that we needed to develop some kind of protection for incoming threats. And that's why the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars system, was developed. Okay. So I know that. I don't know any particular details or which ET was the most dangerous. And you have to understand that this subject matter is highly compartmented within the intelligence community. This just means that just because you have a top secret security clearance, which I had, I didn't have a need to know all the particular details about something like that. And so I wasn't briefed into it. So I didn't know it all.
So Rick, because you're talking about things that are potentially sensitive, how are you allowed to do this without any repercussions to Rick Doty?
Well, I know what I can talk about, and I know what I can't talk about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there that I won't talk about, that I feel that should be secret, should remain secret. And I stay away from those subjects. Now, I have been visited by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, on an occasion when I gave a lecture. I spoke about a particular subject that I shouldn't have. They came to me and told me that I overstepped my bounds, so to speak. And I said, I admitted it. Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I won't talk about it again. And I haven't. Now, I had a non-disclosure statement, a contract, but that expired some years ago. So that's why I can talk about things that I feel I can talk about, and there's a lot that I won't talk about.
So you're not going to talk about what I'm not even going to ask, but what I'm going to suggest. So are there other things UFO alien related that are far more sensitive that you could never talk about, that are known?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's threats, and there's other things that could cause some kind of panic among people, or a particular group of people, or particular religion. So yeah, I stay away from those subjects.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. I'm watching this chat going up and down, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few questions. And please, people, put your questions in capitals for Sky, and she'll fire them over to Les at some point in the next 10-15 minutes. But tell us about some of the most interesting cases you've worked on, Rick, if you don't mind, please.
I worked on a case in Utah some years ago, well, during my time. I wasn't the primary investigator of this, but there was a guy who lived right outside Dugway Proving Grounds, southwest of Salt Lake City, Utah. And Dugway Proving Grounds was a place, a military base, army base that manufactured and stored chemical weapons. And of course, after World War I, there was a ban on chemical weapons in wartime. But as we all know, there were countries that still used them. So we maintained a stockpile. Anyways, that's Dugway Proving Grounds. There was a man that lived right outside the gate. Well, I should say a mile or two outside the gate in a trailer by himself. He worked on the base. He was a photographer. He'd been in the Army. He got out of the Army. He was a fantastic photographer, got a job as civil service on the base, and worked on Dugway for years as a photographer. At some time during his time at Dugway, he lived in a somewhat remote area outside the base. He came home one day, and this UFO landed in his backyard. Well, actually, right outside his fence line, and he began a contact with this extraterrestrial race. Now, he was not a very educated man. He had a lot of common sense, but didn't have a lot of education. I think 8th grade was it. So, and he maintained contact with this creature that would come and visit him periodically. It wasn't every day; it was periodically. They gave him souvenirs. They allowed him to take pictures, and then after he retired, years after they'd left, he had more contact with him. He had all this information, all these pictures, all these artifacts from this extraterrestrial race, and he was going to die. He had cancer. He smoked 5 or 6 packs of cigarettes a day, and he was a terminal cancer patient. He didn't know what to do with it. He didn't have any family. He was an orphan, never been married. So he actually wrote a letter to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations at Hill Air Force Base, which is about 70 miles away. And they kind of brushed it off because they didn't really believe, another kook. But he wrote him another letter. So one of the agents up there thought, I better go out and talk to this guy, just in case. So when they did, and he showed him everything they immediately had to contact a specialist, and we were called 9Qs, a code for somebody who investigated UFO activity. And this was in the early 80s. So they contacted me. I was closest base to there. So I flew up there. We went out there. We talked to the guy. Fascinating story. He had his own photo lab. The pictures that he had taken was breathtaking. He couldn't make it up. Number one, there's no way in the world he could have faked these pictures. Number one, he wasn't educated enough. Number two, he didn't have the facilities to do it. And some of these artifacts these ETs gave him was really out of this world. So we asked him, what do you want us to do? He said, well, I can't keep these, and I'm afraid they would fall into the wrong hands, so I want to give them to you. You can take them. So we did. We took everything he got. We maintained contact with him for a few months more, and then he was eventually sent to a VA, a Veterans Hospital in Salt Lake City, and he died there. Now we have all these documents. All these photographs, all these artifacts. We had to send them up to headquarters, the Defense Intelligence Agency. I wish I would have kept some. Because
Rick, I've just got to butt in there because that's what I was going to say. Obviously, you wouldn't have kept any, but were anybody ever tempted? I'm not, because I don't want you to put your head in a noose here. Were anybody ever tempted to keep these sort of absolutely, well, what would you call them? They're into word to describe what you would have in your possession, really, is there?
Oh my God, this would be the gold mine. It would be the gold mine of UFO activity.
Well, more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be beyond the shadow of a doubt of proof. Now, we didn't do any studies of the artifacts, but one particular artifact is a statue. It's made of something that we can't figure out what. It's similar to ceramics, but it's not ceramics. It's something else. And I'm not a metallurgist, or I'm not a material specialist, so I can't even go into that. But it's apparently their worship statue, or their god, a statue of their god. Ironically, this thing looks, you could look at this picture of this statue, and you can go back in history, primarily Tibet, Nepal and Tibet, and find gods that appeared almost exactly like that. So that would probably mean that this particular race of creatures came here thousands or hundreds of thousands or maybe thousands of years ago, and bestowed upon the people of Tibet and Nepal these statues, or these artifacts. And there's others. There's this a real thin piece. It looks just almost like a piece of plexiglass, very thin.
Just wrote that down, actually.
Just thin. It's about 8 by 12 or something like that, like a tablet, almost like a tablet, you know, an electronic tablet. You can look right through it, see right through it. But when you set it down, there's another plate that comes with it, it's a silvery, I'm calling it a silvery plate, but it's not made of silver, it's something else. If you place this plexiglass on the silver plate, you start seeing the universe. You start seeing pictures of star systems. And now they don't know how it operates, and they don't know what exactly, if it's their home planet or their star system or solar system or their galaxy. But we didn't have a chance, because we only had it in our possession for a few days, for us to actually study it. Of course, then we had to ship it to Washington, the Defense Intelligence Agency. So yeah, I wish I would have kept, but you gotta understand that we had a job to do. We're duty sworn to do that job, and we had to do it. And we couldn't keep anything. If we would have kept something, you know, we would have ended up in prison, you know, it's a federal offense. Because immediately everything that he had given us, we had to classify.
And you wouldn't have been alone. There'd have been more than one documenting this stuff, wouldn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there were 4 other agents there, intelligence officers. Yeah, like that. Yeah. It would be 4 other intelligence officers there that, you know, it would have been a conspiracy if we said, hey, let's keep something. We couldn't do that.
Just before we get to some questions from Les, so I'm watching comments rolling up as well, and you said that a UFO landed in this guy's backyard, kind of thing, and I from what I saw, I could imagine this guy's rolling his eyes, but it's not as incredible or not as far-fetched as it might sound, because a few years ago, myself and Bob Brown, and I'll keep this brief because we're here to listen to Rick, we spoke to some security guards who were on cliff tops at Flamborough, and they'd been there during an archaeological a survey, geological survey, should I say. They saw a white light. First of all, they heard the noise that were absolutely deafening, and it were vibrating their internal organs. It was just so, it was like they were at a rock concert. Everything was separating inside them, and a white light came into the cabin, and everything went monochrome, and then it faded down, and they said there's a blue object outside the cabin, literally outside. UFO. This guy that got it on an holiday camp's CCTV footage, and this guy had it on his phone for ages, and he assured me he's still got the phone. We've never got the footage, so there'll be people listening to me saying, oh yeah, I know what you're saying, Paul. But we got this story, but nature of his job, we've not been able, and his employers, we've not said where it's from, but there's more to that one. I'll speak about it next week probably, because there's a very sensitive place in the very top of Scotland that registered something at Flamborough Head the night that happened. And there might be people listening saying, how do I know that? And they'll know, and it's true. But sorry, Rick, I cut you in mid-flow there. If you've cut it short, we'll go to Les and get some questions.
I think I heard about that case. I think one of the somebody from the Randallsheim, when we went over there years later, talked about something to that effect.
Yeah, I can quite believe it. And I'm the last person to be saying what you're talking about, Rick, is not possible when I'm claiming in a book called The Night People that I've seen beings in my room as a child. I'm either deluded, a liar, or I'm telling truth. And my own heart, this is my truth. But we'll go to Les. Les, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have lots of questions, guys, and thanks for a riveting show tonight so far, guys. Thank you very much. Got some great questions in tonight, Paul and Rick. So Wandering the North is asking, what does Rick know about aliens being on the moon and structures and bases on the dark side?
Well, I was in a room some years ago when I worked for the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin. And let me explain what that is, as some people probably don't know what that is. It's a private institute run by Dr. Hal Puthoff. And we had contracts from DARPA, which is a defense agency that handles all advanced research and development. So anyways, we were in his complex, and Dr. Puthoff was also sometimes called the father of remote viewing. Him and Barry Geller and Kit Green and others researched remote viewing in 1974 at the Stanford Institute, and then that was developed by the military. Anyways, we had a remote viewer there, a retired military Army remote viewer, and he remote viewed the moon, and he saw structures. I didn't see any ETs, but he saw structures on the moon, on the dark side of the moon. So that is the only information I have about the moon and whether it contains live ETs or aliens and structures. We know there's structures on the moon. In fact, Neil Armstrong and some of the other astronauts have talked privately to us. In fact, Neil Armstrong, before he died years ago, I'm a member of the Retired Intelligence Officers Association. He came and talked to us, and he had fully admitted that not him, not when he landed on the moon, but other astronauts witnessed structures and UFOs flying around the moon.
Wow, so that's some information there, Rick. Thank you. I've got another question, and let's have a look. Ian Green 9 is asking, what is Rick's view of Project Serpo? And that's it.
Okay. I don't think we have time enough to go into all the details, but Serpo, in 2005, a retired intelligence officer started sending emails out to a number of people, including Victor Martinez, regarding a Project Serpo or Project Crystal Night. And it was supposedly an exchange program between us and the EBINs. Now, the EBINs are the ones that were crashed in Roswell. We wanted to, the EBA 1 or EBA we had in captivity wanted to go back to his home planet. He couldn't use his craft, and he was hoping that we could send a signal, communications to his planet, And so they could set up some kind of a program where they could come back and pick up the dead bodies and him and take him back. Well, unfortunately, he died in 1952. So, but he provided us with a lot of information, and we were able to. And I know this for a fact. We were able to communicate with the planet called Serpal. Now, this is, I'm probably going to say this for the first time on any venue, any podcast or any lecture. Serpal was a code for secret extraterrestrial remote planet operations. That's what Serpal means. A lot of people have talked about where did he get the word Serpal? That's what Serpal means. And that used to be classified. It's not classified anymore. So
Thank you.
now to say that we went, I don't know. There's a lot of truth behind the Serpal story, but there's a lot of falsehoods behind it. Some people say there were 12. Some people say no, there's only 3. Some people said that they never actually left. There was a plan in place. They made communications possible, but when the ET craft landed in Nevada, our astronauts couldn't survive on their planet, on their spaceship, so they didn't go. I mean, there's all sorts of stories about whether it's real or not. Well, I don't know, but I can tell you that there are people out there, including this guy by the name of McKeever, who's dead now. He claimed to have gone. He was a commander. He had like 700 hours of cassette tapes.
Yeah.
That we didn't listen to every one of them, but we listened to a lot of them. And he was recording everything that not everything, but what he was doing on the travel to the planet while he was on the planet. Plus he wrote and documents in a almost a not a detailed form, but a highlight form. He had 6,000 pages. Now, a lot of people say, "No, it's a hoax. Somebody run out and wrote it." I don't know who would have went out and wrote 6,000 pages as thoroughly and as detailed and as technical as he could have about a planet that we've never been on. And now you jump ahead. Now we know where this planet is. We've done a lot of research on this planet. Everything that he's dictated back that he brought back with him in 1978, you jump ahead to the Webb telescope, the Hubble telescope. Everything about that planet is absolutely 100% factual. Now, how would he have known that back then?
It's true, Rick. So
that's, go ahead. I'm just saying that's what I know about Serpal.
Right. So you're telling us this, Rick, and obviously I've never heard anything about this. What other names who are living are privy to this knowledge as well? Because this sort of more so validifies what you're saying, even though we don't know the truth of it. What other people are out there that are privy to this knowledge?
Oh, there's plenty. There's a couple astronauts. There's still a colonel a general. He's a brigadier general, 1-star general, who's still alive. He's 96 years old. In fact, I had a chat with him a few weeks ago, not about this, but about something else. He didn't go, but he knew the facts, and he will tell you face to face that it's factual, everything. Now, there's parts of it that's hard for me to believe. But, if I wasn't there, I mean, I was just, 1960, I mean, just a little baby, kid. I wasn't there. I didn't know. My father, I thought my father would have known something about it, but before he passed away in 2015, I had a lot of conversations with him about the subject. He said, no,
No.
I don't know anything. My uncle passed away before that. He just won't. My uncle was strange. He wouldn't talk about the subject at all, any subjects about UFOs. So I don't know if it's
No.
if it's real or
Fine.
not.
Thank you. And Les, let's have another question.
Yeah, we've got a few more questions, and thanks for that answer,
Thank you,
Richard. Lisa Rod is asking, and I'm just going to read it as is on here. Richard, could you talk more about George Arthur, alleged ET?
George.
So I don't know anything about that.
That's not off the top of my head, that.
George
Arthur. I don't know if it's been the question's been wrote correctly.
No,
from Lisa.
Right, let's move on.
Yeah, okay. Alien Woods, and I know you touched on this a little bit earlier in your talk, Richard. Is asking, where are these craft from, and did they ever find out? I don't know what did they ever find out means.
Well, I think probably Rick's covered what he knows on the origins of where these things are from, and probably done that after you'd asked the question. So we're sorry about that. Fire another one at him.
Okay, old Gaffer is asking, please ask Richard about Paul Benowitz.
Well,
that's a long story. Paul Benowitz, to make it short, Paul Benowitz owned he was a private businessman. He owned a Thunder Scientific corporation right outside Kirtland Air Force Base. He made humidity sensors for submarines and other things. He had a government contract. His house was right outside Kirtland Air Force Base, the northeast section of the base. He took pictures, and he was a scientist. He was a physicist. He took pictures of a lot of different things. He collected a lot of electronic signals coming from the base. He came to the base and told one of the chief of security about what he was gathering. The chief of security was required to tell me. I was a counterintelligence officer. He told me. I went out and we talked to him. Paul Ed started an investigation called Seven Lambs. It lasted for about 6 years. And Paul was actually taking pictures of a classified drone program, and also taking his signals that he was collecting was a laser system that we had developed that we could shine the laser up in space and blind Soviet satellites as they were passing over classified areas. So that's what he wandered into. I had to convince Paul that what he's actually seeing was UFOs and not something highly classified. But Paul was already a believer. He was a member of APRO and MUFON. He was an investigator. So I didn't have to spend a lot of time telling Paul, hey, I think this is UFO related. He already believed it. And then we had two people interfere with the investigation, Alan Hynek and Leo Sprinkle, who were convincing him, in fact, it was UFOs, providing him information, providing him with supposedly alien language, and also a computer. So they were more harmful to Paul than I would have ever been.
Yeah.
So that's kind of Paul in a nutshell.
So obviously Alan Hynek changed his stance on the subject of UFOs, because originally he was brought in. I want it to discredit the notion that people were seeing actual structured craft, UFOs, and then he changed that stance. So originally then he were actually feeding him the line that these were UFOs. Did he know it were a secret project?
No. Alan Hynek and Leo Sprinkle were not involved in any kind of briefings of the subject. In fact, they had contact with Paul for months before I came to Paul's office one day, and I saw this computer monitor, and I said, "Oh, Paul, did you get this new?" And this is 1980. Remember? I said, "Did you get this new computer monitor?" He said, "No, it was given to me." So the red flags went up. I said, who gave it to you? He said, well, Alan Hynek and Leo Sprinkle gave it to me. I said, when? He said, few months ago. I said, they've been visiting you? And then Paul told me the whole story.
Yeah.
And Paul felt very embarrassed because he hadn't told me. And I said, Paul, you don't want to listen to anything those guys telling you. He said, well, I won't anymore. So we took that. I said, Paul, can we take that monitor back to the office and let our technical people make sure there wasn't anything planted in there? And he did. And there wasn't anything.
No.
But they did interfere with the investigation. And I didn't, but we had some FBI agents visit both of them and told them, you got two options. You can keep your mouth shut and stay out of that, or we're going to investigate you for espionage. So that ended the Leo Sprinkles and Alan Hynek's involvement with. Now, the other part of this was the National Security Agency, NSA, was also investigating Paul because of the laser signals. I didn't know about that investigation for several weeks. So they were involved before I knew, and they should have coordinated with me. Eventually they did. So they were also involved in it.
Thank you. Very good. So we're at the top of the hour. Les, have you got anything else to ask us, or we can move on afterwards?
Yeah, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping here, guys. And for Paul, have you got a website that people know you have a website because the website's on the stream?
Excellent. Yeah.
Banner. So tell people what they can do when they get there.
Well, basically, please. The website, truthproof.uk, that I'm sure Les says you can see it. I can't, but all good. Report UFO sightings, unexplained phenomena sightings. As people know, we've got a list well over 100 now since we've started website of totally bespoke original sightings. You'll not find them anywhere else. You can buy the books on the website, and you can get the books on, if you want the electronic version, from Amazon Kindle. Other than that, I'm just here to sort of gather knowledge and spread the word and talk to people like Rick. Have you anything you want to share, Rick?
Well, I had a website. I had two different websites, and unfortunately they were hacked. And then I created a new website just in May, and unfortunately that was hacked. So at current time, I don't have one, but I have a new website designer who has a very secure system that we're going to. It costs a few pennies, but or a few pounds, I guess. And we're going to have that up probably by 1 January, or maybe earlier than that.
Great stuff. That's good. So we'll move on then. I just want to draw back to something you were talking about. Oh, sorry, Les. Go on.
Yeah, just one more thing, Richard. I hear you're appearing in the UK very, very shortly, and if you can tell us a little bit about that event.
Yes, I will be appearing at the Mini Awakening in Manchester on October 16th. I'm going to be doing a presentation on the secret space program. I'm going to reveal some things that haven't ever been discussed in the secret space program about secret satellites that we've launched, the connection between Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, and our deep space sentinels. And so, yeah, I'm going to be doing that presentation, and it's going to be a great 2.5 hours. I'm going to reveal a lot of real new things about the United States secret space program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Richard.
No, I can't. But well, I'll ask Rick something, and then I'll have a quick scan through. You know, Rick, when we talked about, or earlier, you talked about Tibet and the statue. Do you think then that these visitors, I'm reluctant to call them all ETs, because I don't think we ultimately know where they're all from, but the visitors, do you think that they've influenced mankind throughout our development?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a full, staunch believer that they've steered our history and they've steered maybe even our technology for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that.
Okay. Well, I can't see the question. Who asked the question, Les?
The question has come from Nick Brown. He's contributed to the super chat. He admits it's a contentious question, and I'm not sure I should be reading it on air.
Okay, fair enough.
If it's something, if it's I don't mind. I mean, I can answer as long as it's not obscene or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask the question very cautiously here. The question is from Nick Brown, and thank you for the super chat, Nick. This may be a contentious question, he says, but Richard, were you not in some capacity responsible for Paul Bennewitz's death? How do you respond to that?
No, absolutely not. I knew Paul and I became friends right up until the day he died. Paul, I visited him at the hospice 4 days before he passed away, and that was in 2000. I approached Paul in '86 when the investigation was over with. I sat down with Paul at dinner, just him and I told Paul, I said, Paul, a lot of what we had to do, I had to try to convince you that what you were seeing were in fact UFOs. He said, you don't have to explain it to me. I know what they were. And I said, well, I just want to let you know these. He said, don't worry about it. So now things that people don't understand is Paul, number one, was a 4 to 5 pack smoker. He drank probably 20 cups of coffee a day, drank probably a quart of Coca-Cola, didn't take care of himself, had a lot of medical problems. But on the other side of this thing that some people don't realize is that Paul actually did take some pictures of real UFOs
right
during this time frame. And he also had a lot of knowledge about Dulce Base up in northern New Mexico. So no, I don't feel responsible, nor did he when he passed away.
I thought that question was going to come up, actually. It weren't one I was going to ask, and thanks for handling it like you did, Rick. And yeah, thank you. I'm sure we're going to have a few more questions, but I just want to pull you back. It'll probably take 2 minutes to answer. But you talked about the statue that the guy was gifted, and
Yes.
your men took away. So have they influenced our culture throughout time? Then the visitors, have you knowledge of this, like Egyptian culture, or is it just something?
I don't have any firsthand knowledge of this. There are other people out there working on that right now. My very, very good friend, Johnny Enoch, who is an Egyptian specialist. He's spent hours and hours in Egypt studying this and other places, studying the relationships between the ETs and us. And there's Billy Carson, my good friend Billy Carson, who's also on Gaia. He's done the same thing. My own personal feeling is that there's a connection.
Yeah.
Now, whether they're interdimensional, whether they came here and moved to our next door neighbor, the parallel universe, or whatever they do, or wherever they live, they have influenced us historically, maybe even technologically, if I can say that, technologically, over the years. Yeah. I think so. Absolutely.
So just to draw back on one thing as well, why male? Because you said that we found a male. Were the only males on these craft?
No, actually, one of the bodies found in the 1947 crash at Corona was female.
Right.
And she had the organs would have had similar organs for a female.
Yeah.
That we could compare it to. And there have been other instances where females have been found at crash sites.
Yeah, I just noted that you said male a few times, Rick. Now then, what about jumping to UK, Rick? Have you got any knowledge of crash sites in UK or UFO related incidents in UK that you've got a bit of knowledge on?
Randallstown Forest is, of course, the most pronounced and probably most startling incident that ever happened in the UK that's been publicized, and I think verified beyond a reasonable doubt that something really happened there. I had an occasion in 1983 when I went to headquarters for some work, some training, to actually read the OSI file on Randallstown Forest, which was top secret. And there's a lot of things in that file. And I was on Linda Howell show with John Burroughs a couple years ago, and talked about this, where that information in that report's never been disclosed. People have gone out and asked for that report, and when they get it, it's all redacted. It's heavily redacted. The same way with the MOD report. So I've studied that. I've been to their Bentwaters and Randallstown Woodbridge probably 6 or 7 different times years later. But the most fascinating time I've spent in UK was a couple years ago when we went to Scotland. We went with some people from the Institute, Hal Puthoff's Institute, to do some studies. We got well, I didn't, but there's some people in the States, scientists in the States, got a letter from a scientist in Glasgow. And he explained that there's some unexplained phenomena that is occurring around Loch Ness. And there's people that haven't really studied it. UK people don't want to touch it. They're afraid to be ridiculed. And so we decided to go over there and just talk to the guy. Yeah. And go tourists. I've never been to Loch Ness before. Go out in the loch, see if we could see the monster.
Apologies there, folks. We seem to have lost the audio.
It's okay.
And video from Richard. It might come back on. We'll just hang on in there.
Yeah, we're pretty...
Probably the intelligence agencies having some impact on us tonight.
I don't know if you can hear us, Rick. You're back in the room. We got you. So
yeah.
So you went to.
So, anyways, we went to Loch Ness, and we went to Scotland. They speak differently up there. we had some problems. Anyways, interesting story I'll tell later. But anyways, we actually spoke to this guy who doesn't want his name out because his wife's a physician, a prominent medical doctor. Anyways, he told us about these strange things that have happened around the Loch Ness. Lights,
spheres of light,
unexplained lights, and this creature, which I wanted to talk about later with you, that these 2 fishermen had just launched their boat from just down from the castle that I can't remember the name of the castle, the big castle there, just launched, and they were going to go out, and it was early morning hours. And when they got out, they heard this commotion on shore where they just left. And when they looked over, they see this creature that was bipedal, but had a huge head. And it was making a horrible sound at them. What scared them They you know, motored the boat away from there.
A fur
And this
cover.
happened in, yeah, fur covered,
Yeah.
fur covered. In fact, I don't have it here, but the guy actually drew what it looked like.
Yeah.
And it's a very ugly looking face, somewhat like a werewolf, but the snout wasn't as prominent. But the head was bubbled, and the hands were huge. And he said there was like human hands, but the feet weren't. And it kind of moved down towards the shoreline, but it didn't seem. They said it didn't seem like they wanted to get into the water, but it was yelling this horrible sound at these two guys. So, well, they got out of there. They went up and they were scared, and they came back, and they were afraid to tell anybody about it. But they told his doctor, and the doctor said, "I've seen this before down there." And it says it lives at some place, and I'm not familiar with all the different names of the place around. I'm sure you guys are, but I can get that to you later. But anyways, so they wrote about this. We went out there, and we went to the exact same spot. We didn't see anything. We didn't find anything. But the more people that we spoke with at different pubs, especially the one we were staying at, brought this up. But they didn't want their names to be connected to it.
Yeah.
A policeman. One of the policemen, he's off duty, and very nice. He showed us a lot of different places. Anyways, he told us, he said, "Oh, yeah, it's been seen before, but nobody wants to talk about it." I said, "Well, what do you think it is?" He said, "Well, a lot of people says folklore." He said, "And you know, there's folklore, as you write in your book, your books."
Yeah.
So we never saw it.
It's going back hundreds of years of the sightings of this thing.
200 years. In fact, the lady that ran the guest house we were at, she had an old a copy of an old 200-year-old manuscript or something that talked about, but it was in the Gaelic type of language that it was real difficult to for us to understand, but other people translated it for us. So we thought it was fascinating, and we knew that there was something to it. If one person said it, maybe we would have went over there. But there's so many different people talked about it, and nobody. We didn't speak to a single person who ridiculed it. When we told them, "Hey, did you ever hear about this?" Not one person ridiculed us. Said, that's well. They either said, no, I've never heard about it, or yeah, so and so told my brother, who told my aunt, who told sixth or seventh hand. They never actually seen it themselves. So that's fascinating. There's so many different people, and it's not something that happened in 1934 or 1938. It's something that happened in 2013, 2015.
And it's such a remote place and sparsely populated. So, you can imagine things are happening. I don't mean right now, but on a regular basis, and nobody would ever know. I've got a contact up there who visits relatives who live on the loch, and his property looks down on the loch. And he thought the Loch Ness Monster, the stories of it, was a load of rubbish. And I can't remember how many years he's lived there, but someone tells me it's 45 years. Paving his drive one day and looks over down onto the loch and can see this head stuck out of the water. He's a salmon fisherman, gives his head a shake. Looks again, and he's watching this thing, not just for a few minutes. He's looking at this thing for 10 minutes until it submerges. Other people around the area, other locals, should we say, I think the knowledge that we get from the UK and you get from the US is sparse. It's known, it's widely known, but these are close-knit communities who are not sharing all of this information. The same fisherman, and I might have got it wrong, he might correct me, probably be listening to this. They were fishing in a boat. I think they said it was a 25-foot boat, and they can read the water. So they know where there's a shoal of fish or what, or you know, they just read the water. And suddenly there's a bit of a wake and they can't understand it. And he looks over the side of the boat. He says, and just there's a huge creature just below the surface, just passing the side of the boat. His relative who's with him says, oh, it'll be a seal. He says, are you joking? He says, it's longer than the boat. So, you know, so I think there's a lot more people had sightings. Likewise, just like what I'm looking at in Eastern North Yorkshire, there's a hell of a lot more people had these sightings and experiences that just sit in silence. Probably some of the best cases that you've never looked into and I've never looked into are still out there, and they'll go to grave with people, Rick. And we know that, don't we? You know?
Oh, yes.
Fascinating. But
absolutely. You know, we went out on the loch on a tour, one of those tours. We had 10 people on the boat with us. And it was this guy, the boat operator was narrating about different sightings and different locations. And he'd witnessed something that, just like you said, that went under his boat, and he knew it wasn't a seal.
Yeah.
And he was going to take us to that place. Well, the funny part of this is he's narrating, and now he's got 8 Americans in a boat and 2 Canadians. We don't understand a word he's saying. We can't understand anything he's saying because he has that act. So I went up to him and said, excuse me, sir. I said, you know what? I really appreciate this, but we can't understand anything you're saying. Oh, okay. So he slowed his language down, and then it was fine after that. But he showed us a place, and we actually, while we were out there, and it was a typical rainy, miserable day. We looked over to the west, and we see this something in the water. And he doesn't see it, but we do, some of the people on board. I said to him, look at that over there. What is that? There's wakes over there, and there's no boats. Let's go see. So, he takes off, and by the time we got over there, wasn't anything there. But
what did you take away from it then, Rick? Because to fly over there, group of people, you must have thought there's something worth investigating here. Did you bring anything back, knowledge-wise, that were beneficial?
We brought back that something happened, something was there, some type of either paranormal occurrence or maybe extraterrestrial. Now, it could possibly be, and one of the guys we were with said, it could very well be that these creatures are living in another dimension. And just like Nellie, she could be living in another dimension, and they come out for a reason that we don't know about, and they make their appearance known, and then they go back.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know anything more about that than this, but we took back that it's a legitimate case. These people aren't lying. I mean, especially the person the two fishermen who we spoke to. I mean, we spoke to them casually over a beer, and then we took them, and I'm an expert in interrogation techniques. I can tell somebody's lying. We take him and interview him separately, myself and another former intelligence officer, and I'm 1,000% convinced that this person is telling us the absolute truth. This person, and you meet these type of people in your life, that this person, I don't care how many times you ask him to repeat a story, it's the exact same story. So that means he's not lying.
Yeah.
He had an experience. Now, what he saw, we don't know. He couldn't explain it.
Do you think then, Rick,
go ahead.
Just jumping from Loch Ness briefly, do you think then that your expertise in this job, intelligence and interrogating people, somebody's had an experience? Because I've noticed that some people who've had an experience, and I hear the core experience, and then over time that experience changes. And I don't mean that they've not had the experience, but it just seems to expand and become more fantastic. And is it something that you notice, not necessarily to discredit the person, because I do believe that at the core of it, people who are coming out with some of these things, I've had the experience, but then the story just becomes so fantastical. I wrote Night People. This isn't about me. I just wanted to say, and I could only remember little fragments and cameos of events, and I don't think I'll ever remember any more. It's not going to grow. I'll not know a start and a finish. Do you know what I mean? But I realised that I've listened to some accounts, and they expand and grow. And do you look for things like that?
Absolutely. It's a psychological effect on an incident. You can, if a person has experienced something traumatic or dramatic, they're going to remember it, and they're going to remember it in the sequence that it happened. And so when you're interrogating somebody, you always want to get the chronological order of event. You ask them about, what happened from, day one, hour one, right? And now if you go back a month later and you ask them, okay, I want to go over this event again, and they change it, then they've had a psychological influence placed on them, meaning they didn't think the first story was dramatic enough or traumatic enough. Now they want to add some things to it. Now, the only way to separate these two is through a regression, a hypnotic regression with a professional hypnotist. And we had, during my time in intelligence, we had professionals. Every one of them were psychologists, and they were experts in hypnosis. So they brought them to the place where they originally told us under hypnosis, and then they regress them either forward or back. And what happens is you can sort out the discrepancies. It doesn't mean they're lying. It just means that they're fantasizing about things, and you can detect. And they're embellishing and fantasizing about things, and you can tell the fantasies. A good interrogator can tell the fantasies or the embellishments, right? But these two fishermen, both of them, exactly the same thing. Yeah. I mean, they didn't change anything. So I'm 100,000 times convinced that they're telling the truth. They experienced something, and not only them, but there were many other people that told us. Now, a lot of people told us folklore. They told us about what their ancestor told them or what they heard growing up as a child, but it also coincided with what these two men saw. So it's something real happened. We don't know what that creature was, but.
So the cryptid side of it obviously interests you. Did you investigate any Bigfoot cryptid type reports during your career?
The only one was we did investigate a Bigfoot sighting that occurred just after a UFO landing. A UFO landed. This man and woman were having a picnic, and this was in Arizona, in a mountainous area of Arizona. They were engaged to be married. They witnessed this UFO, took pictures, a lot of pictures. And this happened some years ago. So they had a 35 millimeter camera. It wasn't digital. They took pictures. They thought it was something military. Neither one of them really had any kind of belief in UFOs or extraterrestrials. They just thought, well, it has to be some kind of military vehicle. And so it landed. It landed some distance away from them, but they saw it land. Well, they were scared to go to it, but where they were at, there was a spring, a water, a little fall. They were going to go get water for their cooking. They were going to cook something. And she went over and got a container of water. And when she looked up, she saw this hairy creature standing by this tree, not more than 10 feet away from her. And she panicked. She just stood there, stared at it. And it stared at her. And it calmly turned around and walked away. And once it walked away, she screamed, and then her boyfriend comes running over, and she explains it to her and to him. They reported it to Arizona highway patrolman, who eventually got to us. We went out, we looked at the area. We saw some strange things that indicated something big had moved through a heavily brush area. Didn't see any footsteps, but they explained, she explained, he didn't see it, just she did. But the ironic part about it, they saw this craft, and then they had pictures that they showed us. This is what we saw land.
So,
And then
that's interesting, because we get reports of multi-phenomena events so happening in certain locations. I mean, to jump to your part of the world or side of the world, we go to Skinwalker. Here at Bempton and Eastern North Yorkshire, we've got similar things. And in Forest of North Yorkshire, multi-phenomena. You've got UFO sightings, you've got strange being sightings, cryptid sightings. But I don't necessarily build in light form, we'll call it the spheres of light phenomena. But I don't subscribe to the idea that the cryptid is somehow traveling in the UFO. I think it might be something about the location. Speculation, Rick, I've no idea, but I think it might be something. And we use the word interdimensional, and are they traveling through some kind of portal? Perhaps we need to develop or create new words, because I don't know, they maybe don't fit. There's just something about a location. Now, did you have repeat areas when you were doing the research where UFOs were seen or unexplained phenomena presented?
Oh, yeah.
Were they one-off areas?
a lot of UFO sightings are occurring in southern Nevada. Now, you can probably figure that a lot of those sightings are research and development aircrafts from Tonopah Air Force Base or Groom Lake or Area 51. But there's a lot of them that probably aren't. And I know that there were several UFOs that crashed in the 60s in and around that area that were recovered by us. So why are they homing in on one particular area? I don't know. You talk about Skinwalker Ranch. I've been out there when I worked for Hal Putoff. We went out there in the 90s, and that's a different story. But there are other things like cattle mutilations that there are sightings of things. But I'll ask you a question. The sheep mutilations, were there ever any UFO sightings before or after those sheep mutilations?
Yeah, I wouldn't say in same time frame, because nobody actually saw what were doing this to these unfortunate animals. But and I spent best part of going on for 2 years at 4:30 in the morning till I could cover land. About 8 o'clock I'd be coming back, and I'd be ringing farmer if I'd found anything. I were going because I'd got people telling me crows were removing the eyes, and other animals were scavenging on carcasses, and I wanted to get there as soon as possible. And bearing in mind, these were 80-kilo ewes, and both eyes had gone, and the crow's not going to turn them over. But yes, strange light phenomena was seen around the same time. We'd got military vehicles. American the Rams were there. In fact, there might be some pictures in Truth Proof 3 of the vehicles with. They in one instance, they were 500 yards away from that, what we'll call it the affected area, the main field where it were happening for best part of 2 years. And I don't know what their presence were. I mean, one night in I think it was July 25th, I was with Bob Brown on the cliff tops, and I'd got a phone call from a guy just looking for information UFO related, because he said his daughter had just seen a UFO driving home from Sledmere to a place called Garton on the Wolds. I realise these places are unfamiliar to you, Rick, but what were interesting, he said there's a strange military vehicle parked in a field as well. It's a Ram pickup. He said it's got this big green box on it with red triangles that's saying hazard and things, and this big dish on the top. Well, nobody found out what they were, and I suppose there's a good chance, Rick, that some of this could have been testing something military. But
Yeah.
the same night that we'd received the phone call, myself and Bob saw 3 huge lights under the sea off the cliff tops, all very close to where everything, the absolute plethora of unexplained phenomena were taking place. 2017, it was just unbelievable, the amount of stuff that was happening. Strange disjointed voices. One morning I walked through the woodland as I'm doing this sort of grid search of the field, not hoping I can find something, but obviously you're going wondering what you're going to find, because it's so surreal when you find an animal carcass and there's no blood and their ears are cut off. So, I mean, I'm sorry, people, because I realise some of the things we say, like last week, a few weeks ago, I mentioned something about a dog, and it offended a few people, and I didn't. There's no way I want to offend people, but I can't dress it up any other way. In the books,
Right.
we've done black and white photographs, so they don't look as graphic. But when you find an animal with ears removed and no blood and bearing colour of a sheep, we know it's a dirty white colour. You're finding them with the faces stripped of skin. You're finding them in some instances with rectal coring. You know there's something else happening that isn't land-based predator. And in one particular instance, there's a young roe deer in the field. And whenever you walked across this field, this huge field, 2 it was sectioned off, it had just run to the other side. I think it weren't quite mature enough to mix with the adults that were breeding, and it stayed in field with sheep. And I get one this morning, I do my little grid search, and the farmer's walking over to me unusually. And normally I'd ring him if there was anything amiss. And he said to me, he said, you know the deer that we've been looking at? He said, I've just took my dogs for a walk up the path. It's over there near the kissing gate. And I park and go through a big double gate, so I never got to that. When we get to this deer, his face is stripped to skin, eyes removed. But what I found interesting was, because it's in a remote place, the farm, he doesn't shut his bedroom curtains. He said, last night, he says, I'm laid in bed listening to music, and there's a white light going round on my wall. And I said, didn't you get up? Didn't you go? He said, no, I didn't bother. He said, and it weren't a torch. And it was weirdest conversation, because I'd like to think I'd have jumped up out of bed and wanted to investigate, but it just kind of blasé. No, I didn't bother. Everything was locked up. But it was the same night that we found the deer the following morning. Do you know? So that's only an instance. It were on his bedroom wall, but could it have been poachers? I suppose it could have been. But why would they have shone a torch round on his bedroom wall?
Yeah.
You know, we're always looking for plausible. I think we'd be silly if we didn't look for most logical explanation. But it was strange. One morning I did the field, and then I went into this woodland outside of it. There's all bracken growing, and I can hear mechanical voices, robotic, and it were really odd. And I don't normally want to walk across crops. And there's a borage, the purple flower that's I think they do starflower oil out of it or something, and that's growing in between me and getting to the field. And I did consider it. I walked back, but I was really nervous when I walked back, because I didn't imagine it. I heard these voices. Could it have been military in the bracken with walkie-talkies? Possible. But then the farmer's got a bit of hard standing and some decking. And he said to me, I parked up, and he sat there having a coffee this particular day, because I didn't just go mornings, this were an evening. And there's a corn growing at the side of him, a full field of it. Well, we all know it's only about 30 inch high. He goes, I heard voices, like robotic voices, while I've sat here other night. I said, really? Bearing in mind I had heard them in the morning. He said, yeah. I said, where? He said, just there. And he put about 10 foot away. There's no tracks in corn. He said, I'm stood looking over, and I can hear voices. There's a strangeness to the area, without a doubt. And I've said it over and over again. I do believe firmly that location is the key. I haven't got the key to unlock and find out what's responsible, for making these things happen. But I don't necessarily think that it's some kind of symbiotic relationship. Then I don't think the cryptid phenomena might not actually be aware of anything to do with the UFO phenomena. It's just the places that are allowing these things to happen. And they're usually old places with a history of burial mounds, and in this country, standing stones and ancient monuments. I know that you've probably not got as much of that where you are, but they're probably old remote locations on the whole, are they?
Yeah. That's fascinating. Now, the one thing that I won't ever talk about is human mutilations, which
Yeah.
I could talk about it, but you don't have big predators there. You have bears, right?
We don't have bears.
We don't have bears.
You know, I mean, we don't have bears. We don't have wolves. Now, I believe that there are big cats that are breeding and populating all over the United Kingdom. I mean, people used to laugh at the idea now, but I think most people accept it because people are seeing big black cats and puma-like cats. There were one seen at Filey a few weeks ago at the old holiday camp, which is now overgrown, and a guy told me he'd set some trail cams hoping he could capture it. But no, we don't have any apex predators that could damage humans. And you don't talk about human mutilations, and we're not really going to go there, but we have touched on it in Wolfland, because there's a UFO investigator who's passed away, a brilliant guy. I knew him, Tony Dodd. I don't know if you can remember or heard of Tony. He wrote a book called Alien Investigator, and he was looking into just what you'd said, Rick, back in the 1990s. And it's the same forests where some of the cryptids that we're investigating and the witnesses are citing these things. These are the same forests where he was doing this research back in the 90s. So, you know, I don't know necessarily if there's a link there, but I think, Rick, if you're still okay, we've got about 15 minutes to go, and we'd probably fit a few questions in. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Yes, thank you, guys. And as I said earlier, we've got some great questions in tonight from our people on the stream tonight. And I've got to say thank you for the super chat, the early one from Nick Brown. Now, I do feel obliged to ask another question from Nick Brown, who's contributed again. And the question is very simple. Any response to the recent Calvin photo? So that's Calvin in Scotland, new photo of UFO with a jet in the background. You guys may or may not have seen it. So
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. It looks legitimate. There's other venues you can find that in. It appears to be legitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add to it because I want to get through the questions. But thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. Feral 2 with her super chats is asking, can you explain why the image of the alien you claimed was on Paul's computer was actually a painting from Linda Moulton Howell's book?
That must mean Paul's computer.
I'm just reading it verbatim, the question, guys. So
the image of the.
Oh, you mean Paul Benowitz?
Yeah, right.
I think they mean no. She first of all, she got that picture from one of her contacts within intelligence. She didn't get it from me, and she didn't get it from Paul. But Paul took that picture. He took it off the computer. He took it off his computer, and we duplicated that because we went back. I didn't, but some other experts, OSI experts, went back and did the same thing. So she got that from the intelligence community. She did. We didn't get that from her.
No, I've been told, Rick, that image is from a computer game.
Really?
Yeah. There's an interview with Linda, and somebody's interviewing her and asks her just that question. That's as far as I'll go with it, because I'd have to research it, and then I'll maybe talk about it next week or in a week or two. But yeah, that's what I've been told. Yeah.
This is 1980, whatever, 1 or 2.
Well, it may be another image.
Then. And they didn't have computer games.
Yeah, well, it may be another image because
it came on. It probably came on. Somebody put it on because it's been on the internet for all over now.
Okay.
Somebody might.
Go on, Les.
Okay, yeah, lots of questions in. I am looking at the time. So, Lisa Odd is asking, going back to the EBE1, so was EBE1 from Zeta Reticula?
Yes, he was from the planet. It was the third planet. Uh, Zeta Reticuli is a binary star group. There's two suns, one real bright, one dim. It was the third. It was in the center portions of the planet. Yeah, and it was and the EBA one called it something that didn't make any sense to us, and then our people named it Serpo, and that meant, as I said earlier, secret extraterrestrial remote planet operations. So that's what Serpo means.
It all ties together. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that, Richard. Alison Buttle is asking, does Richard know why greys are taking humans?
No. Number one, in order to understand, well, first of all, a creature comes here from some other world or someplace else. They are not like us biologically in any way. Their brain structures are totally different. There's no way we could understand their behavior pattern. We can't understand why they behave, why they do what they do. And so it would be very difficult to us to know why they're doing these things. Now there's two grays, okay? There's the good grays. The Ebens are the good ones. The bad ones are the other grays, and they're confusing. The people confusing them. The hostile grays are the ones that actually are responsible, probably for more abductions. But I'm not an expert in abductions. I just know they happen. I've investigated some, but I'm not the person to ask that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and to follow on with a question from Lucy Brown, what was their digestive systems like? So we've talked about the features, appendages, etc., and sex, male, female. So digestion, how did that?
Well, again, they're different biologically from us. They have the Ebens had a very simple digestive system. They had just one stomach, but they had two glands to remanufacture what they ate. They had their own food, although at some point during the 5 years, EBA ran out. So we had to figure out how to feed it, and we were able to do that. And I'm not an expert in that. Actually, Linda Howell would be the one to ask that question, because she's the only one that I know, a UFO researcher, that actually spoke and interviewed the handler, EBA 1's handler, an Air Force captain who, of course, has died now. But it's a simple digestive system. That's about all I can say.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Richard. And Lisa Odd is asking, Richard, what's your thoughts on Phil Schneider and the underground alien species?
Well, Phil Schneider, number one, if you look back in his history, you're going to find out that Phil Schneider was a high voltage technician. He worked on high voltage power lines. He was involved in an accident whereby a line broke, hit his hand, chopped off 2 fingers, and then hit him in the chest. He was in a hospital for a number, weeks, I guess. So those injuries that he claimed that occurred down underground at Doty, the war against the aliens, actually happened during a power line incident. All his friends knew this. I mean, people that, and in fact, his former supervisor was on Art Bell and explained this all to Art Bell years ago. And so that kind of busted his bubble. So no, I don't believe anything that Phil had said. Now, his death was in fact suspicious, and whether it was suicide or whether somebody killed him, that's another story.
So you've just bust a lot of people's bubbles there, Rick, because they'll look at those old bits of footage of him talking and showing the hand, and probably that's that you're saying things that people don't want to hear because everybody wants to hear the alien narrative. And I'm not saying you're right, but I'm not saying you're wrong either. But it's good to hear that point of view. Thank you. Go on, Les.
Okay, we've got a question from our moderator, Skyflower, and thanks for the question, Sky. Yeah. How far are we on? No, I'll start that one again. How far are we in relation to working with the alien life based on your historic timeline of UFO work?
Well, I don't know it all, as I've said before. I wasn't briefed into everything, but there's a story that goes out there that's been circulating for years, and there's a couple of people that have verified it. That we have a alien working at Area 51. They codenamed him J-Rod, and J-Rod is I don't know which species of ET, but he's supposedly assisting us in reverse engineering. Now, there is a picture that Art Bell somebody sent Art Bell years ago, showing an Air Force vehicle supposedly taken at Area 51. It's a big, huge truck with a big, huge box on the back of it. Supposedly the environmental chamber or a van that transports J-Rod. And on the outside of it, it says J-Rod. Now, whether that's real or not, I don't know. But Art Bell had that years ago, and the person that sent it to him said, "Yeah, J-Rod is in fact an ET, and he's helping us with reverse engineering." So you want to believe that?
But that's once again speculation, isn't it? We that is a line that somebody could say just to throw us everything in air. The full deck of cards has gone in air with that one, really. He's got its name on the side of truck, and yeah, we are doing this, but I haven't got any proof of anything anyway. But
I don't either.
Some people would want a little bit more proof than somebody telling out all this. I think I would for that bit of information, but yeah, go on, Les, please.
Okay, well, I don't know if this question's relevant, but I'd say Barry Crump is asking, is Linda Moulton Howe okay? I'm only asking because she hasn't done a live stream in 3 weeks, so I don't know if you any updates.
I don't have any
Linda Moulton Howe
personal knowledge of whether she's sick or anything, but I can say this: there are some really, really good UFO researchers out there, and then there's some really fantastic. I'd have to consider her a fantastic UFO researcher. I mean, she's went through the gullible phase, so to speak, where she would believe in anything. And I know Paul brought up something earlier about whether she believed in that or not, but she has good sources. She has good sources of information. And one of the things that we tried to do back in the 80s when I was working on Operation Against her was trying to find out who her sources were, because we figured that they were giving her classified information. So she's, as far as that goes, she's a good researcher. As far as her condition, I don't know.
No,
but she's sick or not.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. What does Richard know about the shadow man with a hat?
The shadow man?
Man with a hat. I don't know what that's referring to, Richard, and I don't know if Paul knows.
No, we do get people talking about seeing shadow type beings with like a large hat. I've had reports of things like that in the UK, but I've directed it to Richard. You've clearly got no knowledge of that, so
I don't. The only thing I would connect that to would the Men in Black, but
yeah,
I don't know if they're talking about that or not.
No, they don't sound like shadows, Richard, do they?
No.
Let's find another question.
Yeah, Marcus, and that question was from Alien Woods. But move on with a question from Marcus, Town and Country. Would like to know what Richard knows about the Utah guy, the guy in Utah.
Oh, Utah.
So I don't know what that question's related to.
Oh, the case I was talking about earlier about the guy in Utah.
Right.
He died years ago, and I don't know what particular information he was real. I mean, he was a real person. some people got could get a report, got a report. Wendell Stevens had a heavily redacted report on that incident, but unfortunately, we didn't have any. We didn't keep any photographs or the artifacts that was provided by the ETs. So, that's about all I can talk about that.
Just one question. I know you've got probably fit one more in, Les, but why? I wouldn't say now, Richard, but why have you decided to share this knowledge that you know?
I want it out there. I mean, there's no reason why all this information, all the things that I've done over the years can't be disclosed. I mean, there's things that can't be. I understand that. And I'm not going to talk about those things. And I've agreed to the government that I'm not going to talk about. And one of them was the human mutilations, and there's some other things. But the stories that about UFOs landings and contacts and things like that, I don't have any reason. I don't see why that would have to be classified.
Do you think
that's why I'm coming out?
You getting the green light to talk about these things, should we say? It must be in favour of the powers above you for you to be doing it. You must be propagating something for them as well. And I don't mean you're working with them. I'm not saying that, but it must be aiding them. Surely else you wouldn't be able to talk about some of the things that you are doing.
Well, if people connect me saying, well, the only reason you're talking about this is because you're sanctioned by the government, and that means you're working still for the government. No, that's not true. I'm not working for the government. But you're right, Paul. I believe that the government is quietly sanctioning what I'm saying, because they're not coming back to me. I mean, I get feedback, but not really negative feedback from others, except when I was visited by the FBI because I said something I shouldn't have. Yeah. And I understood that, and I admitted to it, and I'm not going to do it again. Right. But I think quietly they're sanctioning what I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you. We've probably got 2 minutes. Fit one question in, Rick, and thank you for your time. We'll just let's run with this.
And Lisa Rod has got the question in twice, and I know you've just partly answered the question, but I don't know if you want to add any more to it. Richard, your thoughts on full disclosure, please. If, when, and how?
There'll never be full disclosure because the Air Force, the U.S. Space Force, which is a new military branch, is not cooperating. So there'll never be full disclosure. There'll be partial disclosure, but there'll never be full disclosure. My opinion.
All right.
And Paul, have you any opinion on that?
No, I haven't. I think Richard's is more of a finger on pulse than me, and it just seems every time we kind of push the boundaries and advance a little bit more, either goalposts get widened or something happens to sort of hold us up. I mean, this slow drip of information, it's probably because we're actually learning more and understanding more about it, and people are way above us are thinking, well, we've got to give them a little bit more. But that's just my thoughts on it, and I've just about done here because I just want to say thank you very much to Richard. You've given us 2 hours of your time, really appreciated, and I hope at some point you might want to come back and have another natter to us.
Sure. Yeah, I would. I enjoyed it. I thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed the questions, and I'm open for discussion anytime.
Thank you. On that note, I'm out. Thank you, Les.
Okay, well, that just leaves here, and thank you, Richard. Thank you, Paul. That just leaves me now to thank everybody who came into the live stream tonight, and thank you especially for the super chat contributions. Always grateful for those. And I've got to thank Skyflower for doing the moderating. Don't forget, we will catch you next time. So keep the notification bell clicked so you get all notifications of when the new stream comes through, and that way you'll be with us. On that note, we end the show. See you next time. Bye.